They didn't just take my company. They took my name off the front door like it was a smudge to be wiped away. And that's when I decided if they wanted clean, I'd make it surgical. I'm Nathan Cole, 56 years old, desert-born and desert-tough. My shop sits off a sunburned stretch of Buckeye Road in Phoenix, where the air smells like hot asphalt and cutting oil. For 20 years, Desert Precision was my world, machined aerospace parts, so exact that the difference between good and dead was a single human hair. I bled for this place, literally and figuratively. That morning, I walked into the conference room with a coffee that had been cooling in my hand since 6 a.m. The monsoon light was pressing hard against the glass, thunder rumbling in the distance. Inside, my business partner, Wyatt Hale, leaned back in his chair like he'd just won something. Beside him, my daughter, Erica, in a sharp navy blazer and heels that clicked too loud on the tile. She was supposed to be my successor. Instead, she'd become his ally. "Dad," she said without meeting my eyes, "let's keep this clean." Wyatt slid a red folder across the table. New investors want a unified vision. That means a change at the top. Who's top? I asked, already knowing the answer. Not yours, Erica replied, quick and cold. Founder Emeritus. No vote. A nice bio on the website. The folder felt heavier than paper should. Inside was the usual legal theater, non-disparagement clauses, a consulting stipend that wouldn't cover shop rags, and a proxy handing over my voting rights. It was wrapped in language meant to sound generous, but I could smell the rot. Wyatt's smile was a practice thing. You sign today, the money clears. Don't sign, and the line of credit disappears. Payroll bounces by next week. Erica's jaw tightened. It's not personal, Dad. It's about survival. I stared at her for a long beat. You learned survival from me, I said. Funny how quickly you turned it against me. The air in the room got thick. My thumb tapped the table once, twice. I set the pen down. I'll need an hour, I said, voice even. I'll bring the signed copy. Wyatt smirked like he'd just bagged an easy deal. Good man. I walked out, past the wall of framed photos, our first ISO certification, the shop's opening day, Erica at 12 wearing safety glasses and holding her first finished part. All those years building something she now wanted to gut. I didn't go to my office. I went to the file room. In the bottom drawer, behind dusty binders and old vendor agreements, was the one I'd been waiting for someone to make me use, DP ground rules. 2 years ago, when Wyatt pushed for debt-fueled expansion, I'd buried a clause in the bylaws like a landmine. If founder control was transferred without an independent audit, the company's accounts would be frozen pending a full trustee review. They thought they could corner me. They had no idea the floor they were standing on was about to drop. I snapped photos of the clause, tucked the binder under my arm, and headed for the bank. The storm was moving in fast. By the time I was done, Wyatt and Erica would wish they'd left my name on the door. The next morning, the rain had cleared, but the streets still gleamed slick under the early sun. I sat on my porch, mug in hand, watching steam rise off the asphalt like the town itself was trying to exhale. My phone had been quiet since midnight, which was strange. Wyatt wasn't the type to give up easily. He was probably huddled with lawyers, convinced he could bulldoze his way through the freeze. That's fine. Let him try. By 8 o'clock, I was downtown, walking into the coffee shop where half the small business owners in Prescott liked to hold their informal meetings. The smell of roasted beans mixed with the tang of old wood and morning chatter. A few heads turned. I've lived here long enough to know when people are wondering if they should say hello or just watch. I went straight to Marty, the guy who runs the machine shop 2 blocks from Desert Precision. He's old school, still uses paper invoices, still trusts a handshake more than a contract. We've swapped favors over the years, enough for him to know when I'm in the mood to share something worth hearing. Marty, I said, sliding into the seat across from him. You still thinking about that expansion? He raised an eyebrow. Not if I can't get the laser cutter I need. Backorder's killing me. I leaned in. Careful doing business with Desert Precision right now. There's an audit underway. Accounts are frozen. Things might stall. Marty's eyes narrowed. Audit? What for? I shrugged, the way you do when you're not answering but you're answering. Let's just say, when you grow too fast, sometimes the books grow creative. I left it at that. Didn't need to say more. Men like Marty have big mouths when it comes to protecting their own interests, and within hours, he'd repeat that conversation to at least a dozen others. By lunchtime, I'd bumped into Pam from the Chamber of Commerce, a woman who thrives on knowing what's going on before anyone else does. We chatted about the weather, the tourist season. Then, like I'd just remembered, I mentioned I'd be missing the next meeting because of all the financial reviews happening at Desert Precision. I gave her the same shrug I'd given Marty. Her pupils widened just enough to tell me she'd be on the phone before I even got back to my truck. It's a simple truth. People believe rumors faster than they believe press releases. And when those rumors come from someone who never seems to spread them, well, they stick. By the end of the day, I had 3 texts from old suppliers. Everything okay over there? Heard some things. Let me know if I should hold the shipment. Meanwhile, Wyatt was calling me nonstop. I ignored him. At home that evening, I sat in my workshop. The smell of sawdust and oil felt like a shield, a place where I could think without their voices creeping in. On my bench sat an old framed photo, Wyatt, grinning beside me at the groundbreaking ceremony 10 years ago. Back when I thought mentoring him would mean passing the torch, not watching him light it to burn me out. I pulled out a yellow legal pad and started writing names. People who'd done business with us. People whose trust we'd earned the hard way. I wasn't going to tell them lies. I was just going to give them pieces of the truth that Wyatt had buried. Like the time he promised a delivery date we couldn't meet and billed early anyway. Or the accidental double billing on the Harris account. Little cracks in the wall that, once you shine a light, look a lot like structural damage. The next morning, I sent a few emails. Nothing dramatic, just checking in with old contacts, mentioning I was reviewing past agreements while the audit was underway. I CC a few strategic people on each one, knowing full well the implication would spread faster than the facts. By mid-afternoon, Wyatt's voicemail had gone from angry to desperate. Nathan, we need to talk. You're killing us here. The board's asking questions I can't answer. Good. Let them ask. Let him squirm under the weight of questions I'd been asking myself for months. And then I made my next move, one that would turn the quiet whispers into a roar. I picked up the phone and called an old acquaintance from Phoenix, a business reporter named Carla Vance. Sharp, relentless, and with a knack for turning financial stories into front-page scandals. She owed me a favor. Carla, I said, keeping my tone casual, you ever look into how small manufacturing firms handle rapid growth? I might have something illustrative. There was a pause. Are we talking hypothetical, or am I about to have my weekend plans ruined? Let's just say I told her, you might want to clear your schedule. Carla didn't waste time. By the next morning, she was sitting across from me at the corner booth of Greer's Diner, the kind of place where the coffee's burned, but the walls have ears. She had her recorder up before she even said hello. I need facts, Nathan. Paper trails, names, dates. The kind of stuff I can print without my editor getting cold feet. I slid a folder across the table. Inside were photocopies, receipts, and a few printouts I'd been holding onto for years. I'm not here to embellish, I said. I'm here to tell you what is. She leafed through them, pausing at one document. They billed for materials 2 weeks before shipment? More than once, I said. And that's just the polite stuff. She smirked, shaking her head. You've been sitting on this? Until the time was right. She leaned back, eyes narrowing. And now it's right? I met her gaze. Now it's perfect. By the time I paid for the coffee, she was already texting her editor. 2 days later, the story broke. Headline in bold, local firm under financial review, alleged billing irregularities spark questions. The article didn't scream fraud. It didn't have to. Carla wrote it like a scalpel, not a hammer. Quietly devastating. It hinted at patterns of unusual transactions and concerns raised by former leadership. She never used my name. She didn't have to. Everyone knew who'd been at the helm before Wyatt. That morning, I walked into the grocery store, and the checker didn't make eye contact. 2 women by the produce section whispered behind their hands. It spread faster than wildfire in dry brush. I didn't hide. I went about my day, hardware store, post office, coffee with an old buddy, as if I had no idea there was a storm. But I felt it in the air. The way people paused mid-sentence when Wyatt's name came up. The way conversations died when I walked past. Around noon, my phone buzzed. Wyatt. Again. I let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, a text, "You've made your point. Stop this before it gets worse." I stared at the screen and laughed out loud. Before it gets worse? We were only halfway up the hill. That evening, Erica called. Not her usual saccharine tone. Her voice was sharp, clipped. "Nathan, this is embarrassing for all of us. If you've got a problem with Wyatt, talk to him directly." "I did," I said. "Several times. You told me to get over it. Remember? That's not it's exactly what you said." I kept my tone calm, even friendly. "But I've taken your advice. I'm over it. Now I'm just cleaning house." She hung up without another word. The next morning, I made sure the story had a little more oxygen. I emailed the article to a few trade publications, adding nothing more than, "Thought you might find this relevant given recent industry trends." Within hours, the phones at Desert Precision were ringing not with orders, but with questions. Carla's editor called her twice to confirm sources. One of Wyatt's suppliers, a cautious man who'd done business with me for 20 years, put shipments on hold pending review. I could almost hear Wyatt's blood pressure climbing from across town. Late that afternoon, I went down to the marina. Not for any strategic reason, just because the water calms me. The smell of diesel, the slap of waves against hulls, the gulls screaming overhead. That's when my phone rang. "Carla." "They're not happy," she said, voice buzzing with restrained amusement. Wyatt's lawyer sent a statement calling the claims mischaracterizations. "That's not a denial," I said. "No," she agreed, "it's not." The next edition ran a follow-up. Company denies allegations, but questions remain. And there it was, the worst sentence any business owner can read. Questions remain. The damage was done. The board was meeting without Wyatt. His biggest client had already called to pause all new projects. Erica's social media went private overnight. And me? I spent the evening in my workshop, the glow of a single lamp on the workbench, flipping through old invoices and correspondence. I wasn't finished. Not even close. Because the thing about tearing someone down brick by brick is that you learn exactly which brick to pull next to make the whole wall collapse. And I had my hand on it. I'd been patient. Maybe too patient. But in revenge, patience is a loaded weapon. By the third week after Carla's article, Wyatt's swagger had turned into silence. No more chest-puffing social media posts about record growth. No more family photos and matching outfits at expensive restaurants. He was shrinking, and I wasn't even leaning on him yet. But the next move had to be precise. I dug into my old files, the off-site ones, the kind no one knew about. Copies of contracts, supplier agreements, and emails from when I ran Desert Precision. Back then, I'd insisted every major deal have a performance clause. Missed deadlines or breached terms, and the client could walk without penalty. Wyatt never read the fine print. One name jumped out at me: Kingston Aeronautics. Big defense subcontractor. Our largest account when I was in charge. They'd been loyal to me for decades, partly because I never lied to them, partly because I once caught a flaw in their specs before it cost them millions. I still had the number for Robert Hayes, their VP of procurement. I called him. "Robert, Nathan here. Been a while. Nathan, I heard you'd stepped back. What's new?" "I'm fine," I said. "But I can't say the same for your latest machining orders from Desert Precision. You might want to check the tolerances on batch 6A before you sign off. Could save you a headache." There was a long pause. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I don't like watching good companies get burned. And you know I've got nothing to gain from lying." By the end of the day, Kingston's inspection team had found irregularities in the batch enough to trigger their performance clause. They froze all outstanding orders, pending a full audit. For Wyatt, it was like a cannon shot through the hull. Kingston accounted for nearly 40% of their revenue. I didn't celebrate. Not yet. I went to work. I sent anonymous tips to 2 more clients, pointing them toward clauses they'd forgotten existed. I made sure Carla got copies of the internal memos Wyatt was sending, trying to reassure staff everything is fine. That phrase, everything is fine, is corporate speak for the ship is taking on water and the pumps are failing. 3 days later, I was in the bank, closing out a small investment account, when I overheard 2 tellers talking. One whispered, "You hear about Desert? Payroll's late again." I almost smiled. Almost. That weekend, I took a walk past their office. Half the parking lot was empty. A handwritten sign taped to the door read, "Office closed Monday due to internal restructuring." I had seen that kind of sign before. It's never about restructuring. It's about panic. Wyatt finally called. This time I answered. "You think you're clever?" His voice was tight, like he was speaking through clenched teeth. "I think I'm thorough," I said. "This is harassment. You're destroying my business." "No, Wyatt. I'm just showing people what was always there. If the truth destroys your business, maybe it wasn't much of a business." There was a beat of silence, then the click of him hanging up. That night, Carla called. "You'll want tomorrow's paper," she said. Kingston's audit came back. "They're cutting ties completely." Perfect. I poured myself a drink, sat on the back porch, and watched the sunset turn the sky the color of old copper. The air smelled like rain. Somewhere in town, Wyatt was staring at numbers that didn't add up anymore, wondering which bill to pay first, which supplier to beg, which call to dodge. The beauty of it was that no one could trace it back to me directly. I wasn't breaking laws. I wasn't planting lies. I was just pointing out the cracks until the whole facade sagged under its own weight. But we weren't done. Not by a long shot. Because Wyatt still had one thing left, his house. The one Erica had decorated like a catalog spread, the one they used for their charity luncheons and community events. And I knew exactly how to take it from them without ever touching a single brick. Houses are funny things. They're supposed to be shelters, but for some people, they're just billboards. Wyatt's place was one of those. For 1,000 square feet of white stucco and glass, perched on a corner lot in Westfield Heights. Perfectly trimmed hedges. A driveway designed to show off whatever shiny car he was leasing that year. At night, the place glowed like a museum, all the lights on, curtains open just enough for the neighbors to see the perfect life inside. It wasn't just a home. It was his proof. Proof that he'd made it. Proof that he was better than the rest of us working-class mortals. And I was going to pull it right out from under him. I started with public records. It's amazing how much you can learn without ever stepping into someone's house. Property deeds, loan histories, tax liens. You just have to know where to look, and I've had years of practice. Turned out Wyatt had refinanced 3 times in the past 5 years. Always for a little more than the last time. He wasn't building wealth, he was draining it. The equity was almost gone, and the mortgage balance was ugly. Then I checked the county tax office. He was 6 months behind on property taxes. Not enough to trigger a foreclosure yet, but enough to be dangerous if someone decided to light a fire under the county's chair. So I made a call. Not to the county, not yet. To a man named Paul Torres. Paul runs a small, quiet firm that buys delinquent property tax debts in bulk, then flips them at auction. I told him there was a particularly interesting property in Westfield Heights with an owner who was financially overextended. Paul didn't need more details. This was his kind of hunt. Within 2 weeks, Paul had purchased the lien and sent the notice. Wyatt had 90 days to pay in full or face a tax auction. 90 days. That's all. Now, 90 days is survivable if you have the cash. But Wyatt didn't. His biggest client had just cut him off. Payroll is late. His vendors were knocking. And now a tax shark was circling his house. I didn't stop there. I dug into HOA bylaws, the homeowners association that kept Westfield Heights looking like a postcard. Found a clause about failure to maintain property appearance being grounds for daily fines. All it would take was a formal complaint. I filed 3. Overgrown shrubs. Cracked driveway. Faded paint on the shutters. Petty? Maybe. Effective? Absolutely. The fines weren't huge, but they stacked up fast, and HOA fines get tacked right onto the lien if you don't pay them. By month's end, Wyatt's perfect house was bleeding money from 3 directions: mortgage, tax lien, and HOA fines. And none of it had my name on it. One evening, I parked across the street in my truck and just watched. The lights were still on, but now the curtains were drawn tight. Wyatt came outside to get the mail. He looked smaller, shoulders hunched. He stood at the box for a full minute, just staring at the stack in his hands before walking back inside. A week later, Carla sent me a text. "You're going to want to see this." Attached was a photo of a for sale sign planted in Wyatt's perfect green lawn. I didn't reply. I just leaned back in my chair, let the quiet fill the room, and thought about the irony. Wyatt had spent years acting like his house was a fortress, but in the end, it hadn't been walls and a roof. It had been a pedestal, and I'd kicked it out from under him without even stepping inside. And now I had one last move to make. The kind that wouldn't just end Wyatt's career or take his home, it would make sure his name never got a clean breath again. Wyatt could recover from losing money. He'd done it before. Guys like him treat bankruptcy like a pit stop, grab a coffee, adjust the tie, and drive right back into the race. So I had to make sure there was nowhere left for him to race. Reputation. That was the real currency in his world. And I was about to torch it. The first step was patience. Let him think the worst was over. Let him believe selling the house would reset his life. The for sale sign came down after 6 weeks. He'd found a buyer, and the smile was creeping back onto his face. Perfect timing. I started small. Anonymous tips to a couple of local business reporters, nothing big, just hints about a local entrepreneur under investigation for financial irregularities. No names, just enough to get their curiosity buzzing. Then I reached out to someone who did like names. Valerie Kent. Freelance journalist. Dog with a bone when she smelled a story. I gave her the bones. Copies of old invoices, vendor complaints, emails Wyatt thought he'd deleted. Not damning on their own, but strung together, they painted a picture of a man running a house of cards. Valerie didn't just publish an article. She dropped a full investigative piece on the front page of the Westfield Ledger, The Man Behind the Curtain, How Wyatt Hargrove Built a Business on Sand. Names, dates, numbers. Even a quote from a former associate, Carla, who'd been waiting years to sink her teeth in. The ripple effect was instant. Clients pulled out. A sponsorship deal vanished. 2 pending contracts froze overnight. But that was just the local burn. I wanted the wildfire. So I called in a favor from someone I'd met years back, an old friend who ran a regional podcast on business ethics. We recorded an exclusive episode. I kept my name out of it, of course, but the story was unmistakable to anyone in Westfield Heights. He titled it, When the Shark Runs Out of Ocean. It went viral. Wyatt's LinkedIn went dark. His company website disappeared. I heard from Paul Torres, the tax lien guy, that Wyatt had been spotted at a diner, arguing with his lawyer over character defamation. And then came the final push. At the Westfield Chamber of Commerce Gala, an event Wyatt never missed, I made sure his name was printed on the seating chart, right next to a table marked reserved for sponsors. He showed up in his best suit, smiling like nothing had happened, only to find the table empty. His name alone in a sea of white linen. I watched from the balcony as the room turned toward him, whispering, pointing, some smirking, some just looking away. He stood there for a beat, holding his glass, before walking straight out the door. That was the last time I saw him in public. They say reputations take years to build. Wyatt built his in months, rebuilt it twice, and I tore it to shreds in less than 90 days. But I wasn't done yet. He lost his money, his house, and his name. All that was left was the one thing he valued more than any of it, and I'd been holding that card since the very beginning. Money can be replaced. Reputation can be rebuilt. But legacy? That's harder. That's personal. For Wyatt Hargrove, his legacy was the community center downtown. His name was etched into the brick wall out front, letters 2 feet high. The Hargrove Center for Youth Development. He loved that place like it was proof he'd been a good man. The irony was thick. He donated the money not out of kindness, but to dodge a tax audit. Still, he clung to it. It was the last corner of the city where his name drew respect. I'd been saving this one. The board of the center was made up of local business owners, two city council members, and a retired judge named Alan Fenton. Alan and I went way back, long enough for him to remember what Wyatt had done to me. I gave Alan a folder. Inside, the full story of Wyatt's financial donation to the center, complete with proof it had been laundered through a shell company linked to an off-the-books contract. Every dollar was dirty. Alan didn't waste time. The board voted unanimously to remove Wyatt's name from the building and return the funds to the city's oversight committee for redistribution. It made the news that night. Hargrove name removed amid financial controversy. 2 days later, I drove past the center. The brick wall was bare. Workers had sandblasted the letters clean. The space where his name had been was just raw, pale stone, like a scar where something had been cut away. That's when it hit me. There was nothing left of him here. His money gone. His house sold. His name burned. His legacy erased. I didn't hate him anymore. I didn't need to. I'd taken away every piece of the man he thought he was. The last I heard, Wyatt moved 3 states over, working under an alias. A man who once couldn't walk a block without shaking hands now couldn't show his face without someone spitting his name. That was the ending he earned. And the only one I could give him. I didn't need applause. I didn't need thanks. I just needed to know that when Wyatt Hargrove closed his eyes at night, he saw nothing but empty space where his name used to be.